talked the week before he passed away, and he asked him where he wanted his ashes spread. And he said at a viewpoint. And Jack told him, I know just the place. And this is it. And I've been dreaming about this for a long time. And I was afraid it had to be late in the year actually, but I had to sell the house first. And yesterday we signed on the closing in the second half. Yay. So I know Bob would have been really pleased about that. And Judy and Steve, I'm so glad that they're here with me. And
that's us.
Steve,
Julie. And thanks all for, and I hope you all come back come to the camp for chowing down. And that's about it.
Well, I reckon Bob is grinning at us with that big old grin. And he's watching us with one eye, and he's watching the rest of it with the other one. And he likes that because it was one of his favorite things to stare at somebody that didn't know anything about him and just disconcert the hell out of him. That guy had a sense of humor bigger than this whole damn county. And he had a heart as big as that horse over there carrying his boots. And I don't think we will soon forget Bob Brooke.
He made an imprint on all of us. That's why we're here.
He's the only guy I know that talks louder than you do.
That's true.
Son talks louder than anybody.
Well, I know one thing. I'll tell you this. It didn't matter when it was. He was better than most doctors in the old days. If you called him up and you said, geez, Bob, all my lights are blinking and there's smoke coming out of the ground. It didn't matter if it was Sunday afternoon, he was sitting down to dinner. He said, well, I'll be over there pretty quick. And it wouldn't be long, there was Bob with his meter and running around and checking stuff out and figuring out what was wrong. He was just one of the most Johnny-on-the-spot guys I ever met. If you needed something, he was there. And when he did something, it was done right the first time. It was good. You didn't have to worry about it.
He was a man of his word.
Yeah, he was.
He had some electrical to do, and I told him about it a long time before, and finally when we got around to it, he was pretty sick. And he and Steve came over to do it, and I said, Bob, you don't need to do this. He said, I gave my word, and I'm doing it. And that's just the way he was.
I tried to tell him the same thing, and he said, no, I'm going to do it. Don't.
It's like talking to a brick wall.
That makes sense to me.
And he made me do it.
Now, I want you to tell the group.
and that makes sense to me.
Yes.
I want you to tell the group about the time.
Yeah, that was funny.
Tell us the story.
We
Get
were,
the details good.
We did a job for Ed McFerrin. It's a law firm in Tacoma. And I think it was a new building, or it had been completely gutted, but we were putting in a whole new service. And the big panel, the main panel, was in this little tiny closet. It couldn't have been more than 3 feet wide and about 2 feet deep.
And here's Bob.
So there's only room for one of us in there. Can you imagine that? And, so I'm standing outside the door, and he said, well, give me this tool and that tool and feed me some wire. And then he wasn't talking for a while. I said, "You okay?" He goes, "Yeah, everything's fine." Poosh! He comes flying out like in the movies from this door, this big green flame. Shot backwards like he got shot out of a can, and lands next to me and says, "Whew! I touched the wrong wire." His hair standing straight up like Doc Brown from Back to the Future. And well, they've probably never seen his hair. He always had his hat on.
I've seen his hair.
And,
Wasn't standing straight up though, it was going in every different direction.
yeah, golly. So that was scary and funny afterwards, but
That's a good story.
yeah, it's funny. It's like the one that came out to your place.
Oh my God. Standing up there in that top of that man lift, the wind blowing like a son of a gun, and it was 38 degrees, and the raindrops were about that big around, about that close together. And we're putting that whole thing together hot. The street, you know, I mean, we're hooking the street up to the pole. Hot in this frickin' storm. And I'm thinking, we are going to die here. It's that simple. And old Bob looks around at me and he nailed me with that one eye and he says, "Again, ain't it great?" He got a wire in each hand. Oh my God. Ain't it great?
There's something else about this site that you don't, most people with Bob, you can see explorer people, you already seen the horseman. So his nautical skills were very, very high. So being laid to rest with his ashes here has the overlook of the water, ever peaceful.
Yeah. You bet.
You know, years ago, this chapter was not going to go to Idaho or Eastern Washington to do the rendezvous. So the chapter decided to do their own horse expo over here, and it was a big deal. I got us on pictures on the afternoon show, but you know, during that show, this is a demonstration of Bob's courage, because during the show he had himself an outfit that showed him as a woman. And I don't know of anybody, including anybody here, that would walk around in that outfit in front of all them folk and have fun doing it. He had a great time, and I've remarked about the courage to do that all this time. Nobody else I can think of would have done that. And he had such fun at it. It was terrific.
That was awesome. I'd forgotten all
Yeah.
about that.
I'm telling you, there's nobody I can think of.
Yeah.
It was great.
And the time he auctioned off his suspenders.
That's right.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The rainbow one?
That was an event.
What a man.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had no butt. So
That's what it all about.
I really liked his saying that he'd always sign the different things that he posted and would say, he says, "I am their leader. There they go without me."
Yeah. He did say that a lot.
One of Bob's favorite characters, I suppose you'd say fictional characters, was Pogo. Simply because of Pogo's infamous line, "We have met the enemy, and he is us." Bob loved that Pogo guy.
I had an office, still do, in Lakewood, a commercial office building. It was built in the early 60s and was pretty much lots of different electricians have come in over the years to patch little problems, and we had a problem in one of the offices. And I called up Bob and I said, "You want to come look at it?" He said, "Sure." Comes over and he looks at it. Now we knew that the electrical system was probably pretty well fouled up, but we knew that it would work with a couple of little tweaks. So Bob goes in there and he studies it. He comes out and he says, "Well, okay." He says, "There's two ways to do this." He says, "It can be cabbaged back together, kind of like it was, or it can be done the right way. If you want it to be cabbaged back together, I'll give you the name and phone number for somebody who'll do it. If you want it done right, I'll do it for the same price." Which was amazing. And he did it. When I met Julie this morning, she introduced herself. She said to me, "I'm so excited to be able to see some of the trails that Bob had something to do with." And what you've seen is a small portion of the trails that he had something to do with. Because of his involvement on a statewide basis, you cannot walk a horse trail anywhere in the state that Bob didn't have something to do with. He was involved in advocacy for trails. And what he did made it possible for those of us that put the labor in on the ground. He made it possible for us to be able to work on those trails. I think all of us who ride these trails anywhere in the state are grateful to Bob Brooke for the work that he did on a statewide basis, building the relationships that give to us the ability to continue to ride stock on these trails. So Julie, you're seeing a little bit here, but not much.
Thank you. You did a good job.
You know, we didn't see Bob ride very often.
Saddle
He
Sore
had,
Bob.
he had everything going.
Issues.
He had good reasons for not riding. But we were parked in cars one time, and he asked me to ride one of my horses. In the early years, I'd take 4 horses up there, and everybody who'd parked cars could have a horse to ride. And so he got on the horse. I said, "Are you okay with this?" He said, "Yeah." He says, "I've been looking at Clinton Anderson. I can do what he does." He was a big advocate of Clinton Anderson. So he rode, and he rode that horse, rode him around, tested him out down there on that north end of the parking lot, rode him around, got off. And I said, how'd that go? He said, "It went." He was very non-committal about it. But it was one of the few times I saw Bob ride, and it was fun. It was fun to see him do whatever he was going to do, you know. I don't know whether he really enjoyed it or not, but you know, I couldn't get that commitment out of him, but he said, "It went."
There was a reason for the saddle sore part.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can't argue with that. I get, at this stage in the game, why, you do get sore. You know,
Yes, you do.
and
We
you
had no
compensate
butt.
for everything.
But
And you kind of pick and place where you think you can go and still enjoy.
Remember the first time I went down to Olympia for Legislative Day? That was an education. I've never seen somebody sweet talk and talk to people like he did. He could just wind them right around his little finger. And I thought, holy cow, you're wasting your time here. You ought to be in politics. And afterwards, when we walked away, but he had a way about him. He could really talk to people and get them to see his point of view.
He was Irish. What do you expect?
Hey!
German.
No, we
He
claimed
had
it.
some Irish in him, didn't he?
She's Irish. We're German.
He married into the Irish family.
Oh, I thought he had some Irish in him.
Well, you marry an Irish person, you're Irish.
He carried on like an Irishman.
He got it from my dad.
Oh.
I'm Libby,
This
and
is Libby.
That's my dad's sister-in-law, Libby Nielsen.
And we're good friends.
And I grew up with Bob. So I grew up at a time when he was not a horse person at all. We didn't ride horses, we didn't do country things, but he liked to fish. But I knew
Loved to
Bob
fish.
as somebody who loved to play the drums and dance and try to sing, do karaoke, and got to be the bartender at the family parties. His parents and my parents were best of friends, and so my sister and brother and I grew up with Bob, being an only child, and the 3 of us. So we grew up together, and always had all the parties together. And he didn't have a very big family, and we didn't either. But the parents being such close friends, and then he ultimately married the wrong sister. He married my sister, and but we had always been so close. The only man in my whole life that was always there for me, and I always knew Bob's love. We had a great, great, loving relationship, and when Joy entered the scene, it was just wonderful to see his joy reflected from Joy.
It's a good fit.
Yep, good fit. And he was a great uncle to my children and even my grandchildren. We had a 70th birthday party for him at my house, and my grandchildren just adored him, and so he's missed terribly. I'm 68, and he would be 72 this coming November.
Oh, yeah, too.
And so I've known him my whole life. I've known him longer than any of you, even his son and daughter.
There you
So
go.
it's a huge void for me, but I just think about all the things he would say to me and the love and comfort he gave to me, and that holds me up many, many times. So he was the love of my life. Yep, and always will be.
And I can add that I know I'm going to see him again one day, and that keeps me going.
Amen.
There you go. You know, I just remembered a cute thing about Bob.
Cute?
Yep, cute thing about Bob.
You even like that?
Not too many cute things about Bob, but there was one, and it just tickled me. And I can't tell you the name of the other person involved in this situation, but I will just tell you that we were at the mule show, and Bob was in the little cook shack cooking breakfast, and he's in there with that spatula flinging hash and hash browns and flipping eggs and having a good time in there cooking away and sweating like a booger, and because it got awful hot in that damn cook shack, you know. So he's going away, and somebody walked in with their plate, just had a few bites out of the food, and they walked up to the stove. Bob's over here, and you know they weren't really supposed to be in there. They were supposed to get their food from the counter, right? And they said, this person said, "Bob, these eggs are runny."
Don't insult his cooking either.
And oh, Bob, I didn't know Bob very well in those days, okay? I knew him a little bit. And he leaned across the stove like this, and he looked at this person with one eye, and he says, "You don't like the way I cooked those eggs?"
Cook them yourself.
And this person goes, and Bob reaches out, and he flipped the spatula around, and grabbed the handle, and handed it to him. "Here, you cook." "Oh, no, it's fine, fine."
He did have such a great way of making a point without ever doing it full, you know, and making you just smile. That he did all the family carving of the turkeys and roast beef and everything at the holiday time, and he'd bring his carving set in, and he always sharpened my knives, and yes, he'd do that back and forth, and everything was perfect, and I'd stand around him. We were always drinking our drinks together, and I'd stand around, and I'd pick the meat off that he had carved off the platter, and I could do that, but then I was full. Only I could do that, but then I was full. But I'll never forget when Steve was about, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12, and they came to our house in Central Oregon where we were living, and I fixed the kids peanut butter and jam sandwiches or something like that, and he didn't want, and my husband and my sister and Bob and I were in the dining room, and the kids were in the kitchen, and Steve didn't want to eat the crust on his bread, and his dad said, "You're going to eat that crust." And he goes, "I don't want to eat the crust," because I think one of my girls didn't want to eat the crust, so he didn't want to eat the crust, and see what he could get away with. And Bob said from the dining room into the kitchen, "If you don't eat that crust, Stephen, I'm going to decrust the whole loaf of bread, and you will eat nothing but the crust." He ate the crust. He just always would make us laugh, and then he'd say, "Don't laugh, you'll just encourage him."
Kind of like
I couldn't help it.
Kind of like what?
Kind of like Peckerwood.
Yeah. It's a new place. Did you bring a Sharpie?
Actually, I got one in my truck.
Somebody said that one.
Smell that?
Should we?
Smelling.
Rain.
Not what I smell.
Smell rain.
So why don't